There are people whose minds never really go quiet. Even in silence, something is still running in the background. A conversation from yesterday, a mistake from 5 years ago, a text that sounded slightly different than usual, a decision that has not even happened yet. And the strange part is, overthinking can look like intelligence from the outside. It can sound thoughtful, self-aware, even wise. But most of the time, overthinking is not wisdom. It is fear, wearing the mask of thought. It is the mind trying to protect you by staying one step ahead of pain. Because if you can predict everything, maybe nothing can hurt you. If you can analyze every possibility, maybe you can avoid regret. If you can replay every interaction, maybe you can finally feel safe. But that safety never comes. Because overthinking does not actually resolve uncertainty. It feeds on it. The more you think, the more possibilities appear. The more possibilities appear, the less certain you feel. And the less certain you feel, the more your mind convinces you to keep going. So what starts as reflection slowly becomes a trap. Many overthinkers do not just think too much. They feel too responsible. Responsible for saying the right thing. Responsible for preventing conflict. Responsible for reading people correctly. Responsible for not making mistakes. Responsible for being prepared for every possible outcome. And when you feel that responsible, thinking starts to feel like survival. This is why overthinking is often deeply connected to anxiety, people-pleasing, emotional unpredictability, and the fear of getting life wrong. Some minds learned very early that being relaxed was dangerous. Maybe you grew up in an environment where moods changed without warning. Maybe love felt conditional. Maybe being misunderstood hurt more than it should have. Maybe mistakes were not treated as normal human moments, but as proof that you were careless, weak, or not enough. In environments like that, the mind adapts. It becomes watchful. It becomes sharp. It becomes hyper-aware. It starts scanning for tone, for tension, for small signs, for what might go wrong. And years later, that same mind may still be doing the same thing, even when the danger is gone. That is what makes overthinking so exhausting. It is not just thinking too much. It is carrying an old survival pattern into places where it no longer belongs. This is why overthinkers often replay conversations again and again, not because they are dramatic, not because they are broken, but because some part of them still believes that the smallest mistake could cost them connection, safety, respect, or love. So they revisit the moment. What did that look mean? Why did they say it like that? Did I sound strange? Was I too much? Too quiet? Too honest? Too emotional? Not enough? And underneath all of those questions is usually one deeper fear. Did I make myself harder to love? This is why overthinking is rarely just about the surface issue. It is not really about the message. It is not really about the dinner plan. It is not really about whether you chose the right words. It is about what those things seem to mean. Rejection, embarrassment, loss of control, regret, being exposed, being judged, being left behind. Overthinking turns small moments into emotional threats, and once that happens, the mind does what it does best. It tries to solve the feeling with more thought, but feelings are not always solved by thinking. Sometimes thinking is exactly what keeps the feeling alive, because there comes a point where you're no longer trying to understand something. You're trying to think your way out of discomfort, and that almost never works, because the real problem is not that you do not have enough answers. The real problem is that your nervous system does not trust uncertainty, so your mind keeps searching for one final thought, the thought that will finally make everything feel settled. But there's no final thought. There's only the temporary relief of another loop, and then another, and another. That is why overthinking can feel strangely addictive. It gives you the illusion of control. It makes you feel active, even when you are stuck. It makes you feel responsible, even when you're only circling the same fear. You feel like you are doing something, but inwardly, you are just burning energy. You stop being present. You stop trusting yourself. You become afraid of your own decisions. You confuse hesitation with wisdom. You confuse mental exhaustion with depth. And slowly, life begins to move around you, while you're still in your head trying to perfect it. This is also why many deep thinkers become deeply lonely, because when your mind is always working, it becomes hard to rest inside a moment, hard to fully arrive, hard to speak naturally, hard to trust that connection can survive imperfection. So instead of living, you monitor yourself living. Instead of speaking, you edit. Instead of choosing, you calculate. Instead of feeling, you interpret. And eventually, even simple things begin to feel heavy. But here's the truth. It has forgotten when to stop. It learned that constant vigilance was useful. It learned that caution reduced pain. It learned that being mentally prepared felt safer than being emotionally open. And maybe that was true once. But not every season of life requires the same version of you. There comes a point where intelligence must become trust, where awareness must become peace, where insight must stop turning against the self. Healing from overthinking does not mean becoming careless. It means learning that not every thought deserves obedience. Not every fear is a warning. Not every possibility is a prediction. Not every uncomfortable feeling is a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes your mind is simply repeating an old strategy, a strategy built on fear, a strategy built on self-protection, a strategy built on the hope that if you think enough, you can finally outrun pain, but you cannot think your way into safety forever. At some point, safety has to become something deeper, not certainty, not perfection, not control, trust. Trust that one awkward moment will not destroy your worth. Trust that being misunderstood does not erase who you are. Trust that life cannot be mastered by endless analysis. Trust that peace does not come from solving every possible future. It comes from no longer needing to. So if you overthink everything, the question is not just, why am I like this? The deeper question is, what has my mind been trying to protect me from all this time? Because once you understand that, overthinking stops looking like a personality flaw and starts looking like a pattern with a history, a pattern with a purpose, and a pattern that can be changed. You do not need a perfect mind. You need a safer relationship with uncertainty, and maybe that is where real freedom begins. If this spoke to you, write in the comments. What do you overthink the most? And for those exploring the deeper personality patterns behind these videos, the framework behind this channel is linked below.